comments. If this goes well, we won't bother you with another meeting for over a month. This evening we have 4 meetings. We have Finance Committee, Fire Committee, Sustainability Committee, and then the Board of Commissioners meeting. Just a couple of announcements before we start. Please silence your cell phones. There is amplifying equipment for those having hearing difficulty during the meeting. When the floor is open for public comment, comment will first be taken from those present in the room and then from those attending virtually. Please use the podium to my right over there and speak directly into the microphone. You can take the microphone out if that's easier for you. And for those on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand so that our Township Secretary can identify you if you'd like to speak. And for all members of the public, please introduce yourself prior to beginning your comments. And comments during the Board of Commissioners meetings are limited to 3 minutes. Just so you know, for anyone making comments this evening, the board and when appropriate staff will respond to comments and questions after all of the public comments, so it's not a back and forth. So don't be offended if you don't get answers to questions right away. We take all the public comment and then we'll respond. So with that said, we will start our first meeting, which is our Finance Committee, and I call on Commissioner Zeloff to chair that meeting.
Thank you, Vice President Gavrin. There is but one agenda item on tonight's Finance Committee meeting. It is for the committee to consider approving a resolution in which we will seek grant funds from the state of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, for a significant project that our township manager will explain.
Sure. Commissioners, a while back, you may recall, we bid a project on River Road that would improve the culvert under River Road where the soapstone drainage area comes down, crosses the railroad tracks, crosses I-76, and we have some flooding problems. They were pretty severe there after Hurricane Ida. We designed a project and bid it, but the bids came in way over budget, and so we stepped back for the time being. In the meanwhile, we have identified an opportunity here to be able to potentially acquire some grant funds under this program with PEMA, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. So essentially what we're asking you tonight is to adopt this resolution, which is a requirement that would allow us to apply for funds with the PEMA program. We'd be looking or asking for money up to $484,860. They could give us anything less than that, but that would be the maximum request we can submit. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ernie. The soapstone issue in that section of Gladwin has been an ongoing issue for a long time. Isn't that correct?
It has, and in this particular point, the culvert under the road is a problem. It clogs up. We had to spend a lot of money to clean it out. And then there's pipe that we want to do something with all the way down to the river.
Are there members of the committee with any questions or comments on this agenda item? Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ernie, for that background. Is this something that would qualify for MS4 permit
No,
potential,
it's not gonna,
since it goes to the waterways?
It's really not going to qualify for any MS4 credits.
Okay. And when do you anticipate work starting, and how long do we anticipate the project taking?
We'll want to find out first if we can get this money.
Yes.
And then we'll go back and go out to bid again.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Grimes, any questions or comments? I believe it's your ward.
No, it will
Okay.
shock you that I endorse this. There's some, we've heard.
There may be others who do so as well. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments from committee members, do any members of the public here in the room or online, Jody, have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners adopting a resolution authorizing the Township Manager to sign all documentation related to the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency Hazard Mitigation Grant Program for the River Road Culvert Project in an amount of up to $454,860. Do I have a second? Commissioner Grimes seconds. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, that item passes the Finance Committee unanimously. And Vice President Gavin, I'm pleased to conclude the business of the Finance Committee this evening.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. We are pleased as well. The next committee meeting also has but one agenda item, and I will call on its chair, Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much, Vice President Gavin. The next committee being the Fire Committee, so it's no secret, does have one item on its agenda, and that is to consider for recommendation to the board approval of a memorandum of understanding with the Bryn Mawr Fire Company. Previously, each of the other 5 fire companies were able to sign on and submit a memorandum of understanding. The Bryn Mawr Fire Company had some questions that they wanted to resolve before doing so. We are pleased that they were able to resolve those such that they could now sign and be the 6th fire company to do this. We discussed this at length before, but what the memorandum of understanding does is it leapfrogs off the strategic plan that we have to give some definitive structure to some of the organization within our fire services, and from the command structure to the operation of each of the 6 companies cohesively, as well as some other items that go into the details for each of the companies, and it emphasizes how much we value the volunteer fire service, which is the backbone of our entire fire service, as well as our career firefighters, and helps us go into the future. So I'm pleased that we now have all 6 of them, so I will make the formal motion to consider for recommendation to the board the approval of the memorandum of understanding with the Bryn Mawr Fire Company, and ask if there's a second. Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will then call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand, signaling aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that then passes unanimously. And Vice President Gavin, I beat Commissioner Zeloff by 3 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. And now the pressure is on Commissioner Courtney, who is going to chair our Sustainability Committee meeting.
Thank you, Vice President Gavin. We also have one item on the agenda this evening, and that is to recommend appointment of 3 new members of our Environmental Advisory Council. EAC has been shorthanded for a while, so I think they'll be excited that we're doing this evening. The 3 members before us, the first, Ann Nozick-Cashman, has a master's in education and environmental science and policy. She's published contributions on energy efficiency, taught environmental science courses, and of course has an interest in public engagement and education. Rachel Spigler, the second nominee, is a professor of biology at Temple, has numerous publications, the list is like 2 pages, on biology and botany, and talks about her love of data science and analytics in approaching environmental issues. Both of these 2 will be great contributions to our goals of public engagement and education. And then last but not least, Thomas Crookham, keeping with the theme, also has a background in biology and has done research on energy transition for retail store design, as well as sustainable product and program design, increasing the recyclability and compostability of product offerings in retail establishments. I had the opportunity to talk to our sustainability manager, as well as the current and former chair of the EAC, about these 3 candidates, and they are very excited to have them come on board and start contributing. So with that, I move that we consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of the appointment of Thomas Crookham, Ann Nozick-Cashman, and Rachel Spigler to the Environmental Advisory Council for 4-year terms, such terms to expire August 2027. Thank you for the second, Commissioner McKeon. Is there any public comment? Is there any comment or questions from commissioners? All right, with that, I call the vote. Please raise your hand if you approve, if you recommend. Looks like it's unanimous. And that concludes the Sustainability Committee for this evening, Vice President Gavin.
Thank you, Commissioner Courtney. With that, I will call to order the August 2, 2023 meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Lower Merion. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you please be so kind as to call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Sinai has asked to be excused. Mr. Bernheim.
Present.
Mr. Churchill.
Here.
Mr. Courtney.
Here.
Mr. Gavin.
Present.
Mr. Grimes.
Here.
Ms. S. Kramer. Here. Ms. G. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. McComb.
Here.
Mr. McKeon.
Here.
Ms. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Present.
Mr. Whalen.
Here.
Mr. Zello.
Here.
Mr. Vice President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We have a few announcements to make. The board met in executive session earlier this evening regarding the following matters: civil service testing process, 1400 Mill Creek Road sewer lien issue, Centennial Road litigation, and an update regarding recreational fields. The Board of Commissioners will be in recess from August 3rd, 2023 until September 6th, 2023. And when we return that night, the 2024 budget workshop will be September 6, 2023 at 6 p.m. Additionally, Monday, September 4, Labor Day is a legal holiday. The Township Administration Building and libraries will be closed, and there will be no refuse or recycling collection on that day. Those are the announcements, and we're going to move on to the next part of the agenda, which is public privilege of the floor. This is the section of the meeting where members of the public may address the board on any non-agenda items. Or any other public matters in which the township has jurisdiction or authority. Please state your name prior to addressing the board and keep comments to 3 minutes or less. If there is a group of people in attendance who are speaking on the same topic, we ask that a spokesperson be selected to address the board and they keep their comments to 5 minutes or less. Comments will, as I said before, be first taken from those present in the room and then from those attending virtually. Use the podium to my right, please, and speak directly into the microphone. If you need to adjust it or take it out of its stand, that's fine. For those on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand if you'd like to speak during public comment opportunities. And again, if you're making comments, be aware that the board and when appropriate staff will respond to comments and questions after all of the public comment. So is there anyone in the room who has anything for public privilege? If so, please approach the podium.
Joseph Abramson, Ballackinwood. I was actually doing research. I was trying to find an old Board of Commissioners video, but I couldn't find it. But what I did find was the Board of Commissioners had a discussion in early 2015 about bike safety and the great idea of putting signs on the road saying share the road or 4 feet or bike markings. I'm just wondering, where are we with that? You know, 'cause it's been quite a while. Also, I wanted to bring up an issue that I guess, you know, you always say that no matter what your political leanings are, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, residents, and guests of Lower Merion. As I'm sure you're aware, you know, you were served with a lawsuit, and the interesting thing about it was that the solicitor basically, you know, when Joshua Prince, who's the plaintiff, I guess, sent a letter to the township, you know, asking, you know, saying to please, you know, remove your ordinance, he wrote, you could go sue, I don't care, and it's a frivolous lawsuit. Or if you do more frivolous things, you know, we'll take care of it. But you don't really have good standing with that. And as I mentioned several times, and other people mentioned several times, you found a solution that had no problem. It took 3 or 4 meetings to get my question answered, was about how many times was the police called regarding an FFL. And I'm not sure if it was the manager or the superintendent of the police, and he's like, none. In all these years of Lower Merion Township, there's been no problem with an FFL. Suddenly, like a scary man comes in and actually wants to make it safer and training and all that stuff, or whatever the case may be, and you have the mob. Your job is to hold back the mob, right? That's why you were elected, to say, this lawsuit is stupid because Lower Merion is going to lose. The same way you lost the other lawsuit, in which case, in where your insurance did not cover it. So you spent over $100,000 fighting the lawsuit. You're now going to do the exact same thing for for what? I mean, is there an issue? Is there a problem? There's nothing, right? It's business as usual, but you just want to say, oh yeah, we're doing something. I mean, if you want to do something, go out and ban all firearms in Lower Merion. You know, then at least go out with a bang. But your zoning and this and where it's impossible to do whatever the case may be, you know, it just makes no sense, and you're not acting in the best interest in the township.
Thank you, Mr. Abramson. Are there any other comments from the room?
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Anne Marie Graham, and I own 1241 Rose Glen Road in Gladwin. I suppose I am here speaking for a bit of a group. I'm against the transverse rumble strips currently set for installation on my street. I was open to the idea in 2021 and expressed this publicly at the BOC approval meeting at that time, with the caveat that the township would need to work alongside residents on placement. We were assured by our Commissioner Grimes, of the following by email, both ahead of the meeting. Quote, with respect to rumble strips, if they are installed, the township will work to select locations that are acceptable to most neighbors. Do not be concerned that strips will be placed in front of your home if you object to them, end quote. And again, after the approval meeting, quote, I expect that the township will provide a draft plan for locations of the strips for you and others to review, end quote. The actual process we're experiencing now is a far cry from the partnership we were sold then. There is no draft plan for us to review. There is no true collaboration with residents on acceptable locations. Many of us have expressed objections now. After an initial set of strips was installed near Rolling Hill Park about a month ago, which my home is next to, I'm able to clearly see cars driving over the 5 sets of strips, and cars do not slow or tap their brakes. I can also attest to the strips being disruptively loud, inside with my windows closed. If these rumble strips were actually going to calm traffic, I wouldn't be here. Safety is paramount, and our street does need help. As a career data researcher, I've looked into the traffic calming use of these strips. There is no data available to support this installation in official PennDOT or federal guidance materials or from real-world success stories in neighborhoods. There's nothing. The 2012 PennDOT Traffic Calming Handbook, used as the basis for this entire project, stated that rumble strips could calm traffic by 1 to 3 miles per hour. But that section was prefaced by, quote, all pavement markings should utilize the latest applicable standards and manuals. In other words, don't implement this in a vacuum. A later 2016 PennDOT publication directs that transverse rumble strips are for use at intersections or stop-controlled approaches only. Noise pollution concerns, however, are well documented. The US DOT notes that, quote, the noise generated by rumble strips is different than background traffic noise and is intermittent. This can create a disturbance for nearby residents and for special environmental conditions, like noise-sensitive wildlife habitats, if there are frequent incidental contacts, end quote. Also worthy of further discussion, US DOT notes, snowplow blades passing over raised rumble strips tend to scrape the raised rumble strips off of the road surface. As a result, raised rumble strip use is usually restricted to areas that do not contend with snow removal, end quote. I want to believe that our commissioners actually want to create safer, calmer streets in partnership with residents. I know that you need to listen to the actual data and our voices if you'd like to accomplish this goal. We shouldn't trade one problem for two, a street that contends with still speeding cars and noise pollution. Please change course now. Otherwise, I guess we're gonna have to wait for the snowplows to come through this winter. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. Any other comment in the room? Seeing none, any online?
Yes, I have Arthur Wolk. I'm going to promote him to a panelist.
All right. Mr. Wolk?
He's on. Mr. Wolk, could you please turn your camera on? There we go.
Go. And you're muted.
Okay, how about that?
There we go.
All right, my name is Arthur Walk. I live at 1400 Rose Glen Road in Gladwin. My neighbor has articulately stated my position as well, but I want to add the following if I may. The Traffic Calming Handbook, copies of which I provided to my commissioners, specifically provides in Chapter 4 that there was supposed to be a kickoff meeting where all of the affected residents would be invited to discuss the traffic calming plan. That never happened. We are entitled under this traffic calming handbook to have that meeting and to express our views on the subject. With respect to speed humps, I'd like to talk about that since my neighbor was talking about matters that directly affected Rose Glen Road. I agree with her in every respect. With respect to the speed humps on River Road, I certainly agree with the residents of River Road who were subjected to high volumes of traffic at high speed, and they needed to do something about it. I commend our commissioners for doing something about it by putting in speed humps. However, the area from Hollow Road to Mill Creek Road is an area that has no homes around it. It has a park, of course. It is to some extent more of a thoroughfare to take traffic from Hollow Road to Rose Glen Road and other areas of the township. I believe the speed bumps were inappropriately built. That does not mean that they exceed requirements. The typical speed hump, is 3 to 4 inches in height. It really depends on the way you measure it. I actually went out there and did my due diligence measurements, and they do exceed 4 inches if you measure them by putting a 2x4 across the top and measuring the distance between the bottom of the 2x4 and the street. Showed you that I need something else to do in my spare time. But the bottom line is there are two ways of building speed humps. One is the method that was chosen by the township, which has the deleterious effect of impacting the bottoms of vehicles, no matter what speed you go. And what happens is you can see the evidence of that in the form of gouges on the tops of the speed bumps. There is another recommendation made by the Traffic Calming Handbook, which is to extend the speed bump to a distance of about 22 feet. And what that does, it provides an approach and a departure from the actual maximum height of the speed bump. It still reduces the speed of traffic. It still results in the reduction in numbers of vehicles by experience, according to the Traffic Calming Handbook. But what it does is it prevents that sudden and very large hump in the roadway, which damages vehicles underneath and makes it an extremely uncomfortable ride. And so, therefore, I would recommend two things. One is that there be compliance with the Pennsylvania Calming Handbook, and those of us on Rose Glen Road be given an opportunity to meet with your traffic folks and talk to them about getting rid of these rumble strips because they're pointless. 1 to 3 mile an hour reduction is a farce. I live on Rose Glen Road, and I can tell you that it doesn't affect the speed that I go down there at all, nor does it affect anyone else's speed. Lastly, and I apologize for taking more than the suggested 3 minutes, and that is that bicyclists have said to me that they are dangerous because when they get wet, they're extremely slippery. And while they go down Rose Glen Road far too fast, one of these days, somebody's going to put the brakes on and they're going to go sideways down the street and be hurt. So I bring that to your attention because others have brought it to mind. One last comment, if I may, and I apologize once again. When I moved to the main line, it was after many, many years of working hard and making enough money to get out here. And I moved to Gladwin, and I've had a wonderful life there. What concerns me is the recent idea that some 1,700 apartments are going to be built in, I believe it's Ballakimwit. And I would caution you that what's happening is you're taking what used to be mostly green open space and you're creating a density that will create the ingredients for crime, increased taxes because a public service is required, and of course, the demon of all of them increased school taxes, which are already out of control, have been out of control, and in spite of my lawsuit, continue to be out of control. So I would ask you to rethink and perhaps revisit the zoning plan that you've come up with, because if you continue allowing this density to grow, you're going to create the seeds of the destruction of the main line, which I know none of you, since you all live here, want to have happen. And thank you very much for allowing me to take the time tonight to speak to you.
Thank you very much. Jody, are there any other comments? Oh.
Good evening. I'm Heidi Cook from 1221 Rose Glen Road. I just want to thank Anne Marie and support what he said this evening, and Arthur for making his comments. I do think that we were all shocked when the strips went down. I would really support having a meeting to discuss this further before the installation of them. I think it would be a wise choice. We did have, what prompted all of this is we did have strips put down directly opposite our front door, as did several of our other neighbors. And further, Maple Hill Road, the stop sign that we did get, which has helped enormously, by the way. We only wish we were able to convince you all to put it at Rolling Hill Park as well. But there are several sets of strips between the Maple Hill stop sign and the top of Rose Glen, which is, you can see the stop sign. I'm not sure what several sets of strips are going to do between Maple Hill and the top of the street where there's another stop sign. So I think we need to just look at this again before anything goes down at your, our expense and your trouble. So I'd appreciate that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, any other comments online?
There are not.
Okay, seeing none in the room. We also did receive written comments, which I'll summarize. You can get the full text of the comments by contacting the Township Secretary. Michael Pollock of Ardmore wrote about various topics, including traffic and development. So with that said, does any board member wish to respond to any of the comments? Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. I will comment on two of the items that were just brought up in public privilege. First of all, thank you to Ms. Graham for being here, and also to Ms. Cook, and it's always nice to see Mr. Wolk, even if it's by Zoom. Let me respond to some of their comments. The township instituted traffic calming measures on Rose Glen Road in response to repeated requests from residents and others in this community. People complained of speeding, reckless driving, hazardous conditions for walkers, runners, and cyclists, and trouble getting cars out of their driveways. Despite what you've heard tonight, we've had several meetings with residents before this board approved the traffic calming measures on Rose Glen. Those meetings were both in person and on Zoom. Officer Farrell and I had a meeting with residents in 2018. Because of COVID, we didn't have other in-person meetings, but Superintendent McGrath and I also had a meeting with residents after the rumble strips were approved in 2021. That was in June 2021. I have also exchanged many emails with residents and had many conversations over the phone with residents concerning the rumble strips, as did members of the township's traffic safety unit. Our goal here is to help protect the lives and property of all those who use Rose Glen Road, neighbors, other township residents, and the general public, while causing as minimal inconvenience to anyone as is feasible. Rose Glen is challenging in terms of traffic calming. It's narrow, winding, and has an incline from top to bottom. After careful analysis, our traffic safety unit concluded that the only practical means of addressing traffic were narrowing the lane lines and putting down transverse thermoplastic strips, otherwise known as rumble strips. Superintendent McGrath reported to this Board of Commissioners when we approved the traffic calming on Rose Glen that other traffic calming measures were just not practical for this road. Any suggestion that we've heard that the strips were approved without public knowledge or input is simply not accurate. In addition to the meetings and conversations I've already mentioned, This board approved the lane narrowing and rumble strips at a public meeting on February 17, 2021. The township's proposal was fully disclosed to the community prior to that meeting by the usual staff memo, which, by the way, is also still available online, and also by me in emails to residents several days before that meeting. 9 residents offered public comment at that meeting when we discussed the rumble strips. 5 of them were offered public comment by Zoom. This was at the period when we weren't meeting in person. Of those 5 who offered comments by Zoom, 3 are property owners on Rose Glen Road, and 4 other residents provided written comments that were read to the board in full. All of those residents were Rose Glen residents. Only 1 commenter of the 9 stated that they opposed the rumble strips. The board then approved the traffic calming measures, including the strips, unanimously. I will also note that a member of the cycling community, who some of I will identify, he argued in favor of the strips. That was Lou Savastani, who many of us will recall used to appear frequently on cycling issues. In my comments at that 2021 meeting, I stated that the township's intention was not to place strips in front of the homes of residents that didn't want them, as Ms. Graham said. That was our goal, and the township's traffic engineer and public works worked diligently to respect residents' wishes. Following that 2021 approval, we heard from several residents who didn't want strips in front of their homes. The township honored those requests, so none of the current or proposed strips are directly in front of anyone's physical residence. A few are adjacent to some homes, but that's only in locations where our professional staff determined that strips are necessary in order for the program to have any impact on decreasing speeding. Due to supply chain issues, the traffic calming measures are only now being put in place. It is true, once again, that we did say that we would give residents an opportunity to look at the plan. I was also caught off guard when lines were painted on the ground. I suspect that's because we had a change of traffic safety and that was lost, but so be it. No strips were put in there are no strips even now in front of any residents' homes. What they did is paint lines in June, so residents have had an opportunity to see where those strips will be and offer comment as they've done now. In June, when those lines were painted, some residents expressed opposition to the strip locations as marked in paint by the contractor, so we stopped work in front of near people's homes and reviewed the program yet again. Sergeant Coleflesh and Officer Farrell of Traffic Safety Unit, Public Works Director McElhaney, and Traffic Engineer Cavani all met with me on site, and then they recommended further adjustments in response to residents' concerns. 1 set of strips was deleted entirely, and 2 others were relocated in response to resident concerns. Our professional staff has now confirmed to me, and I am satisfied, that we have made all changes feasible to minimize the potential impact on residents without compromising the effectiveness of this traffic safety program. I am well aware, and even before tonight, that some residents are not pleased with these measures, but other Rose Glen residents are supportive and have expressed that to me since June, as are other members of our township community who use Rose Glen for driving, walking, and cycling. We now need to allow the traffic calming measures this board approved to be installed and give them a chance to work. That being said, the township will continue to work with residents and others to make Rose Glen safer. If we determine the strips don't work after a reasonable time, I will ask township staff to reevaluate that aspect of the program. We'll also consider any additional means of addressing reckless driving and speeding, although as we already know, the options are very limited given the topography of the program. So that's my speech on strips. Let me just say, in terms of Mr. Walk mentioned the River Road speed humps, which thankfully do not have prepared comments about, but I will just say that the speed humps that are put down from Mill Creek to Hollow Road are not, the speed humps aren't just there for residents. We have a township park there, and many people walk, run, and cycle, and the speed humps have successfully contributed to a dramatic slowdown in traffic in that part of the township. I will also say that Public Works Director McElhenney has probably heard from me about 5 times since the speed humps were put in, asking him to confirm and reconfirm that the heights are according to state code. And if he were here, he could comment on that himself, but my understanding is they've been checked many times and are according to state code. So, thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner O'Neill?
Oh, thank you. Quickly, with respect to the River Road speed humps, I also have quite a few complaints about them, and the answer is consistent that they are compliant. The one question that I do have, and one that maybe we could hear back from our Public Works Division or engineers on, the ramp up and the ramp down to soften the what Mr. Walk described isn't a bad one, and they don't exist now. So maybe it's worth looking into. We've heard enough complaints. Maybe it's time to, maybe it means building them out up to 22 inches wide. That may be worth it.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much, Vice President Garber. I'd like to address comments from Mr. Abramson. We agree in part and disagree. Where we agree is we can do better with bikes. And we're fortunate that our Director of Building Planning is probably one of the biggest advocates, and so maybe we can, push harder for that. But on the other issue raised, we separate. And this is not the place to have the legal argument that's out there, but what I would like to address is I think that your representation of the letter issued by our township solicitor is not accurate. In response to a letter from the attorney who is representing the plaintiffs in the case brought against us, there was a very professional and succinct response noting that, one, what we're dealing with is a zoning code, and that fault was the ordinance that was passed was after a lengthy and comprehensive legal review. There was not just an invitation, go sue us, but a professional courtesy is stating that somebody would accept service so as to minimize costs for a plaintiff, and attorneys do that as professional courtesies all the time. The reference to something being frivolous was that in the letter that was sent to the township was a threat to sue each of the commissioners individually, and that indeed would be frivolous. And so it appears that plaintiff's counsel took that warning to heed because he elected not to sue the commissioners on an individual basis. There have been motions that are filed in the court. That will take its course. We would not pursue it if we were not confident in our position. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Commissioner Zelov.
Thank you, Vice President Gavrin. I, too, am aware of complaints about the height of the humps on River Road. So since our township engineer is with us this evening, I'd like to ask him to comment on the compliance of those speed humps with the state standards.
Yeah, the speed humps are consistent with other humps that were installed throughout the township. They do meet PennDOT standards within the required tolerance. We've measured them. We were there when they went in. So, yeah, there's nothing unique about the River Road humps.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other? Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, Vice President Gavin. Just to follow up on Commissioner Bernheim's comment, my recollection, Commissioner, is that it went more than just threatening to sue the individual board members. I think plaintiff's lawyer said that he would bring criminal charges against the members of the Board of Commissioners, which is unprecedented and frankly is a frivolous contention. So it's sort of, if the shoe fits, the shoe fits. I think that was an outrageous thing by plaintiff's counsel, but this isn't a place to address it. It will be addressed in court. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Commissioner McKeon.
Thank you, Vice President Gavin. There were a couple comments that came in about Montgomery Avenue and the traffic situation there. So I just wanted to put out something. I had an idea, and I sent a photo to Lori. I'm sure she has it. She could pull it up. But one of the problems I see on Montgomery Avenue, if you're traveling westbound, you get to the light that's Gypsy Lane on one side and North Wynwood on the other side. Going westbound, the lane after the intersection after that is Cherry Lane and Penn Road. That has left turn signals at going both ways on Montgomery Avenue. So I just did a little with like Google Maps and paint. I put in a left turn signal there. So that would be, if you're looking at it, would basically you'd be going left, and you'd have an arrow to turn down what turns into North Wynwood, and it's Gypsy Lane on the other side. That intersection I found to be very problematic because since there isn't a left turn arrow there, 40 or 50 cars can back up in the left lane just because one person has to turn left. And then they'll inevitably start trying to hop over into the other lane. My daughter was hit by, she was driving a car, she was hit by someone else who hopped out of that lane because they got impatient. And I know that I think people get very frustrated there and actually causes people to speed up later on as they go down Montgomery Avenue. So it makes a lot of sense to me to have the one at Cherry Lane and Penn Road. I think it's worth looking into having a very brief left signal there at North Wynwood and Gypsy Lane. It may border on Narberth, on the borough of Narberth. That's the only thing. I don't know if we have jurisdiction for all that. But as we look at ways to try to improve the flow on Montgomery Avenue and traffic safety, that's just something I wanted to bring to the board's consideration for maybe looking at down the road at some point.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. And Commissioner Courtney, before you make your comment, looks like you have a challenger for president of the AV Club. So, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vice President Gabbard. I actually want to echo what Commissioner McKeon is saying, that is in the 5th Ward. It is a problematic intersection. A left turn light was added in the eastbound direction when the Mill Creek Bridge went out to ease some of the additional traffic that was brought on, but our traffic safety department said it wasn't warranted to add a left turn light in the westbound direction. In my conversations with members of the community and the Civic Association, particularly the neighborhood around there, everyone loves the left turn light and hope it stays even when the Mill Creek Bridge is repaired. And I have asked that we do it in the eastbound direction as well. I think it's a great idea, Commissioner McKeon, and I applaud your Microsoft Paint skills.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Courtney. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, we will move on to the next section of the meeting, which is public comment versus public privilege, which we just had. This is a section of our meeting where members of the public may address the board on any agenda items. Again, everything I said before, the 3 minutes, the podium, in the room, the Zoom, all that fun stuff. Does anyone in the room have any comments on any agenda items?
Joseph Abramson, Balak Inwood. First, I just want to add one sentence to public privilege because I wanted to echo what Commissioner Bernheim said last week with regards to the messaging about the bag ban. The newsletter that just came out today has the incorrect wording and does not follow the ordinance. I was looking at the grant for the ARP nonprofit community grant program. And I don't really get the point of it. It looks like something that could either be done in-house, a student could do it, or, it's literally Excel, VBA, macros, figure something out, because you just want to know who should get it. Maybe have a committee of a couple of people who will decide, who will look at it once the numbers are close enough or something. But I think if we spend the money, we don't need to spend the money on a consultant if we could somehow do it a lot cheaper elsewhere. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other comments in the room, Madam Secretary?
No one has their hand raised on.
All right, we did have 2 written comments. First, Maura Gillen of Haverford.
Mr. Wolk just raised his hand.
Okay, Mr. Wolk, if you turn on your camera.
Gotta get back to that screen. Okay. He should be on screen in a minute. Maybe he raised it by accident. Oh, no, here we go.
Yes, may I speak now? Some quick response to what Josh said in his prepared remarks.
This is not, Mr. Wolk, this is actually this is not the time to respond to comments from commissioners. This is if you have comments on agenda items, you're welcome to say them now. If not, you can certainly reach out to Commissioner Grimes offline.
Well, I did have my hand raised to respond to.
But this section is about public comment.
No, I had my hand raised in the last section to respond to Commissioner Grimes.
I appreciate that, Mr. Wolk, but that's
well, that's fine. I mean, look, this is not It's no problem. I'll handle it another way. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. There were also, anyone else online?
No.
Okay. There were also 2 written comments, first from Maura Gill Haverford, who wrote regarding HARB reappointments, including the process followed and suggested alternative options, and Michael Pollock of Ardmore wrote in support of several agenda items. If you'd like to see the full comments, which were circulated to the entire board, please contact the Township Secretary. Does any member of the board wish to respond to any of the public comment? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the next section of our meeting, which is the consent calendar. Does anyone, my crystal ball is telling me, does anyone like to remove any item from the consent calendar? Commissioner Zelov.
Vice President Gavrin, I would request the removal of item L from the consent calendar, which is the approval of the grant application package for use with the Lower Merion American Rescue Plan Nonprofit Community Grant Program.
Can you say that again?
No.
Okay, so we will remove that item, and I will make a motion for approval. Or any other removals?
To the amendment.
Seeing none, I will make a motion for approval of the consent calendar as amended and including the items from the meetings of the Finance Committee, Fire Committee, and Sustainability Committee held earlier this evening. Do I have a second? This is usually me. Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
For the adoption of the consent calendar, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McCone.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zelloff.
Aye.
The consent calendar is duly adopted.
Great, thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We will now go to the item that was just removed from the consent calendar, which is on page 15 of your packets, I believe, which is the ARP grant application package. And I guess we start with a motion. Any commissioner have a motion to make? Commissioner Zelov.
Thank you, Vice President Gavrin. I will make a motion, then explain the motion after, if that's what you would, it sounds like what you've requested. So I will move that the ARP grant program amendments replace the ARP grant program approved last week in committee, amendments on pages 31 through 45 in our packet.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Sean Kramer. Is there any discussion?
So may I
Commissioner
explain?
Zelloff?
Thank you, Vice President Gavrin. So last week we had in the Finance Committee, we had a presentation of the documents that have been proposed for the ARP grant program. We discussed those. We voted to recommend those for approval by the board, but we also, I indicated that there was a desire to make amendments to particularly the description document, the first document, and that was largely based on an email that the board received earlier that day, meaning last Wednesday, from Commissioner O'Neill, where she had taken a lot of time to make several edits to the documents. Rather than discuss those edits in a committee meeting of the Committee of the Whole, as we are, I suggested that the subcommittee of Commissioner Sean Kramer and I would get together to review those amendments. So the next day, which was Thursday last week, Commissioner Sean Kramer, myself, Commissioner O'Neill, as well as our township manager and our new assistant township manager, had a call that, gosh, I think we were there for an hour or so, when we went through the edits that were proposed by Commissioner O'Neill. We agreed with some and didn't agree with others. And so we then asked our township secretary to include the amended documents in tonight's agenda, which is a little bit unusual, but we greatly appreciate that, and the documents are indicated as amendments. They were not discussed or even available last Wednesday, and so because we did that work the following day. But I thought that, we all thought that was a better way to allow committee members to have time to read them and so they could be prepared to talk about them tonight. So the changes are, as I indicated, start on page 32 of your packet. So, and the bulk of them are on those first 3 pages, 32, 33, and 34, and are all identified. And the keeper of the documents during our meeting was our assistant township manager, and so he as we went through it, he made the changes. So I'll point out, I think, just 2 of them that are significant. We think that the others don't change the intent and don't change really the intent and the how we want to explain the program. The first change is the name, and we are recommending that it, rather than be called the Community Grant Program, that it be called the Vitality Grant Program. That recommendation does come from Commissioner O'Neill, and she made the case to Commissioner Kramer and I that it's a name that conveys some more energy and excitement about the program, and we thought that made sense. The other edits, you'll see on pages 1, 2, and 3. The only other edit that I would like to highlight is on the second page, which is page 33 of your packet, under the category of application and selection process, item 3, grant allocation. We did spend a lot of time on the issue of the maximum grant. And so with some important input from our township manager, Commissioner Kramer and I, Commissioner Sean Kramer and I, not only felt that the maximum grant of $100,000 was appropriate, but we thought it should be clarified. Actually, our manager suggested it be clarified because he suggested it was somewhat ambiguous in how it was originally written. And so you'll see it says, no grant will be awarded that exceeds $100,000, nor shall any applicant be entitled to receive more than $100,000. The intent is if an applicant, an entity, an organization makes 2 requests for $50,000 each, they could be approved, but that would be $100,000 total. And so that we wanted to clarify that, since that was an issue that was raised last week, and it is certainly an important issue. Then I would like to point out on page 37 of your packet, which is the application attachments. There are 2 important changes there. We heard both public comment last week as well as commissioner comment. Item 1, we added the category of compiled financial statements, and then we added the phrase, if available. The point that is, the concern is there are some smaller organizations that may not have financial statements prepared by an outside preparer. And so that's why we added the if available, because even if they don't, they are required to file an IRS Form 990, which is all nonprofits have to submit, and it has to be complete, including a board member list. But there are 3 levels of outside financial statement preparation. The highest level, the most expensive level, is an audit. We know about that. The township's finances are audited by an outside firm. The next level is a review, and then the 3rd level is called a compilation. So that's why we added compilation, and I explained the if available part. Then on the next, further down, there's one other change where we said that any applicants who are awarded funding will be required to provide the township with audited, reviewed, or compiled financial statements, the same concept, to allow that 3rd category of financial statement presentation to be acceptable. So those are what I believe to be the significant changes. And I would just say that Commissioner Kramer and I, we talked last week about how we spent quite a bit of time going through this, and I think last Thursday when we went through it, we also did so with the care that is needed for preparing these documents. So if it's okay with you, Vice President Gavin, see if Commissioner Kramer would like to add to what I've said.
That is absolutely okay with me. Any other comments from any other commissioners?
I could not have said it better myself. Thank
All
you.
right.
I do a big
Commissioner
question.
All right,
Zahn, for your
hang,
summary.
hang on, Commissioner Gilda Kramer, while we're on the Kramer train.
As I'm looking at the application attachments requirements on page 37, you addressed the outside audited or compiled financial statements if available, but you have not included that if available language in subpart 2, which is the IRS Form 990 for 2022 and 2021. And this would make any newer nonprofit ineligible to apply. And I suggest that I would like to make a friendly amendment to add if applicable and available to subpart 2 on page 37.
So we have a proposal for a friendly amendment.
Okay, so I'm just looking to you about
Yes.
responding. So Commissioner Kramer, I guess with input from our manager, we felt that every nonprofit, regardless of size, has a requirement to submit a 990. I mean, trying to think of, you know, I sit on the board of Ludington Library, and it's a small, you know, it's the board of the library, and a 990 is submitted. I think
A 990 if the entity existed in 2021 and 2022. If it didn't exist, it couldn't have a 990 for those years.
I guess we also had, in part of our discussions, the approach that we want to be making awards to nonprofits that have some performance period, some track record, that we not be making awards to nonprofits that have no other sources of revenue. That's been a sort of an underpinning of what we've done for the contributions we make out of our operating budget to nonprofits. We don't want to be the only contributor. So I would say that we felt that having some track record and having some existing for some period of time was an important component of the grant award program.
So it sounds like that's not a friendly amendment.
I would not accept it as a friendly amendment.
So Commissioner Kramer.
I would make a motion that we change that. I don't even understand. I mean, there are nonprofits like Neighbors Helping Neighbors, and I don't know whether this would make them ineligible. There are other potential nonprofits that would be ineligible, and I think that it's appropriate to allow all of them to apply.
So Commissioner Kramer, is your amendment adding parentheses, if applicable, at the end of 2?
Yes.
And available.
If applicable and available.
Okay, is there a second to that amendment? Commissioner McComb? Any discussion about that amendment, Commissioner Grimes?
So, I'm sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner
Yeah,
Grimes.
so, and I don't know if Commissioner Kramer or Commissioner Zella may know the answer to this. Is there a requirement somewhere else here that it has to be a 501c3 organization?
There is not, but in a discussion I had earlier today with our manager, we sort of landed on the view that in order to be any nonprofit's required to file an IRS 990, and a for-profit cannot file such a form.
Well,
I'd ask our manager to speak to that.
Right, that was the discussion regarding, this is a nonprofit grant program. But if we add to the clause that you don't have to file a 990 unless it's available, and if you also waive, you've already put in if available on the outside compiled, reviewed, or audit statements, then we're getting no financial information from anybody.
I mean,
Might I suggest that the better solution might be under IRS Form 990, that we add a parentheses that basically says that may be waived by the board for a new organization.
Commissioner Grimes.
Then you're not waiving that requirement for everybody who's submitting applications.
if I could just finish my comment, and then I'll cede the floor. So I would just say I want to hear what others have to say about Commissioner Kramer's amendment, but I would say that at minimum, for me, an organization would have to have 501c3 status, exempt organization status, whether they filed a 990 or not. So I would just make that point. Having said that, I'm reserving my conclusion on the amendment until I hear from others. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. If it's applicable, then it'll be available. So if we were going to make that amendment, but I happen to think that Manager McNeely probably provided us with the appropriate way of doing it. Maybe there is some exception that's sitting here now that we can't contemplate. So if we have that clause in there that, they would have to come apply to the board first and say, we can't do this because of X, and we can't think of what X is here, we at least have that opportunity so nobody is automatically excluded. But I would suspect that anybody who's going to apply is going to have to, they're going to have that anyway. But I think that Manager McNeely's suggestion is a very good one.
So are you proposing an amendment?
Well, we have one that's already on the floor, so
Yeah, no,
we have to
are you
deal with that.
proposing an amendment to that amendment that's on the floor?
I would accept the substitution of Manager
McNeely's
proposal on how to address it.
So, Manager McNeely, if you would be so kind as to explain to us what the amendment now reads.
So that item number 2 would require the 990, but with a parentheses that may be waived
Upon application to the board.
by the board or upon application by the board for a new organization. That way the requirement stays in for some kind of financial information from everybody else who's been in existence for a period of time.
So would it be fair, if I can summarize it, because I'm sure our township secretary is thrilled right now, after 990 on number 2, parentheses, which may be waived upon application to the board for organizations which were not in existence in 2021 or 2022? Is that a fair statement?
I don't think that was,
Oh.
I don't think that's exactly what
Okay.
Jim McNeely said. It could be waived by the board. So I think substantively it makes a whole lot of sense. But one point of clarification is, this is in connection with what all applications must include. So the point is to be able to get the application in. There may be, at the time, there may be the undergoing the process to get, sort of the 501c3 status or something. So it's really a timing thing. So I think without putting in, I don't think it's necessary to include the language you just put in 20 or 20, 21, 20, and just leave it the way Manager McNeely put it.
And so if I may, you may want to do it at the end. It's IRS Form 990 for 2022 and 2021, including board members list, which requirement may be waived upon application to the board.
Okay, so this is Commissioner Kramer's amendment. So I think what I am hearing now, and feel free to change it up, instead of after 990, it's now after 2021 on number 2, parentheses, everything I said, and the closed parentheses after the word board. So forgetting the language after board, Madam Secretary. So, Madam Secretary, can you read clearly what that says? Now, can you read? I know you can read.
No. I think it makes more sense to put it at the end.
Yeah.
At the very end.
Yeah,
because you still want that member list.
Yeah.
Like, it's not only applying to the 990, it's also the member list.
Well, no, I think if I'm understanding this amendment correctly, the board member list may not be waived. We're only talking about the 990 being waived.
Okay.
So you don't want the board member list having that opportunity to be waived, which would happen if you're at the end of the sentence, as opposed to after 2021.
That makes sense.
So, Madam Secretary, can you read what the amendment now says?
Not with your language.
Damn it. Okay. Yes, Commissioner Kramer, please.
That subpart 2 should read, IRS Form 990 for 2022 and 2021, including the board member list, and then parens, these requirements may be waived upon application to the board.
Did you want to leave off for new organization? You had originally said that.
So, hang on, Commissioner Burnham, the floor is Commissioner Kramer's right now.
It's fine, the IRS Form 990 for 2022 and 2021 for the organization, including the board member list, and these requirements may be waived upon application to the board. Close paren, period.
Okay, so that's the amendment we have right now. Are there any other comments or questions about that amendment?
Did you second?
Okay. Well, right, thank you.
Seconded.
Okay, still seconded. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Zello?
I'd just like to comment on what Commissioner Gilda Kramer said. The requirement for a Form 990 was in no way to exclude any existing organization, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, for the example you raised. And our manager has just said they do have 990. So it's important, since you raised it, that that's not by any means the intent here. The intent was to have appropriate financial information if we're going to give significant funds to organizations.
So the question I have, Commissioner Kramer, is you said that these requirements, which would include the board member list, may be waived?
I'm happy to leave that, the requirement of the IRS Form 990 for 2022 and 2021 may be waived upon application to the board.
So that's a friendly amendment.
To my friendly
your
amendment.
All right, Madam Secretary, do you have that?
We're all
friends. Okay. Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you. I don't want to further complicate with another kind of bifurcated amendment or friendly amendment to your amendment. Why don't we just include the board member list a number 4 as a copy of the board member list, and strike it from number 2 and make it number 4. That way there's no ambiguity about whether the board list is or isn't included depending on the year it was formed, et cetera. Because that's very important information to see who's on the board. But I can make that another time, or unless you want to drop it, and I'll amend it to number 4.
That is a question for Commissioner Kramer. It's your amendment.
If you want to take that phrase, the board member list, and make it number 4, then I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you.
Can you say that again?
So
I am fine with taking the board member list and making that a separate requirement as number 4.
So the amendment now says, number 2 says IRS Form 990 for 2022 and 2021, parentheses, something about waiving it that I don't know offhand.
These requirements may be waived upon application to the board.
Okay, and then number 3 stays the same, and number 4 says the board member list.
Correct. Oh, sorry. That was
Madam Secretary, do we have that?
Got it.
Awesome. Any comments or questions on the current amendment?
I'll make it
Commissioner
easier.
Zello.
I'll accept it as a friendly.
Okay.
fabulous.
Thank you.
All right. So any other, I don't know where we are. Any other questions or comments on the overarching motion?
One question.
Yes, Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much. So in number 1 in the applications, we made clear that where it says outside audited, reviewed, or compiled financial statements for 2022 and 2021, if available, right? So if they're not available, right? So availability is the issue. Drop down then to the second paragraph under number 3. It says applicants awarded funding will be required to provide the township with audited, reviewed, or compiled financial statements from a qualified outside accounting firm for the years they expend the awarded grant funds. Just want to make sure everyone understands. If you get the money, then you got to do that, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thankfully, seeing none, we will call it for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously, and I think I pretty much rocked that one. The next item on our agenda is, I don't even know anymore. It is on page 46, the ARP application review consultant. We can start this off with a motion if anyone wants to make a motion. If not, I will make it. I will make a motion to award a consultant contract to Triad Associates for assistance with the proposed Lower Merion ARP nonprofit community grant program by providing grant application review services at a cost of $175 per hour with a not-to-exceed amount of $28,000 without prior authorization. Do I have a second? Commissioner Sean Kramer, thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments on this? Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much. I recognize how the vote came out last time, but this wouldn't be the first occasion where maybe some powers of persuasion could change the board from its previous vote. I indicated before that I thought respectfully this was unnecessary. That we have a process that is in place where there will be applications. I don't believe that there are going to be a flood of applications that are going to require us yet to get a consultant to go ahead and review them, that we've probably overestimated the number, and I state that predicated upon what has happened at prior times where we've had something similar to go ahead and distribute. I also think that we overestimate the degree of difficulty of somebody reviewing the applications and noting the information that we are going to want to look at the time that we go forward with it. Further, I think that the board's got to recognize who and what we are. We are not about to have a personality transplant because of this. This board is each member here, for the most part, type A personality. If we have any legitimate criticism, is that maybe that sometimes we get too much into the weeds. We are about to distribute $1 million. I am very confident that everybody here will be reviewing these applications and making a determination as to which ones they think are the most appropriate. The point system that has been put out there, very, very thoughtful, but it's very, very subjective. If I just pick, for example, where you're talking about the criteria was community needs, and this is the way you would get 2 points. Submission provides a sufficient amount of information to show the need in the community and how the project will respond to that need. To get 3 points, the submission provides significant information to show the need in the community and how the project will respond to that need. What's the difference between sufficient and significant? And we've got 14 of us, we may all view that differently. We then are going to hire a consultant that's going to go ahead and take that guess, and the person that consultant hires to do this, I assure you, will know substantially less, or maybe significantly less, about the township than each and every single one of us. In addition, the cost that we're told is $175 an hour. That is extraordinarily high. What do you suspect Trident will be paying the individual who's actually doing that work? $175 an hour? I assure you not. You know, $35 an hour? Possibly. So I think that it is a very, very expensive type of thing. We have already spent $50,000 with Trident when they went to give us a write-up about where they thought the community felt we should have the ARP funds. Commissioner McKeon noted some reluctance previously and voicing some concerns that he had, as did I on the front end of that, of not thinking that was necessary. Stealing the words of Commissioner Churchill, are we not hiring somebody to do our job? And that is what we did. We don't need to do this. I am very, very reluctant and cannot think of another occasion where I've suggested to the township manager, here's how to control your staff, but I believe we have the capability in-house to give us the grading on the applications that come forth so that we can go ahead and make the determination. If we spend $50,000, we're about to spend $25,000, that's $75,000 that we're giving to consultants. I would much rather see us do something as providing funds for, neighbors helping neighbors as opposed to commissioners helping consultants. So I would ask, that was a spur of the moment, Commissioner. So I would ask that you reconsider this, that I don't believe that is necessary. I think we can accomplish the goals that have been put forth by our subcommittee, and that we don't need to have a consultant do, in essence, our job. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Sean Kramer.
Thank you. I would just like to make a statement of support for this motion. We thought about this a lot, and we as we stated last week. I'll just go over again why I do think that a consultant is a good idea in this case. Triad knows the ARPA rules better than we do, better than I do, I should say, and I would say better than our staff does, who they are immersed in the ARPA work throughout the state, and I think that they are well positioned to judge proposals. I think that we don't need to spend staff time to do this. This is something, as President Sinai said last week, this is something that we can outsource. And so I think it is something that is worthwhile to outsource. I think that I trust Manager McNeely's judgment when it comes to the feasibility, the reasonableness of the charges that Triad is proposing. If we don't get very many proposals, then we don't have to pay a lot. We won't have to pay very much money to do the review. I'm very comfortable with the cap of $28,000, and I think that this is the right way to go. The last thing I'll say about the use of a consultant is that it provides another layer of scrutiny on the proposals, trained scrutiny, and I think that it provides another layer of objectivity. We will be able to look at the proposals as well, but I think that it's a wise move, particularly given, the appetite for these funds. We're going to get a lot. We're going to get a lot of heat. We're going to get a lot of people applying for this money, and I think that it's smart to have more eyes than just our own on these proposals in order to make the best decisions that we can.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Commissioner Churchill. Okay, changed his mind. Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner McComb.
I agree with Commissioner Bernheim's comments generally, that this seems like a lot of money, and it seems like way more money than it needs. But at the end of the day, I'm going to support it based on what Manager McNeely has said. And I don't, if he represents that this is going to be a hardship for staff who's already overworked, then I don't think it's appropriate for us to inundate him with more. Second, I take at face value his comments. I think they were stated by others that Triad isn't really they're making sure that the proposals are in compliance with the funding standards, but they're not evaluating them qualitatively, because I don't think they can. And I think, as Commissioner Bernheim and others have stated, nobody knows the needs of the township better than us. So to Commissioner Churchill's point, we're not hiring people to do our jobs. We're hiring them to do jobs that basically just, did they cross their I's, or dot their I's, cross their T's, and so forth. So I think with that in mind, let's hope that it isn't $28,000. In my mind, it should be less than half of that, if it's really just sort of a perfunctory function. But at the end of the day, if we don't have the resources to do it, it's just kind of cruel and unusual punishment to make staff do something they don't have the time to do.
Thank you, Commissioner McComb. I'll jump in with my comments here. I served as a consultant for a number of years. There are two different kinds of consultant projects. One where there are discrete projects that come in. This fits into that category. Another is where you hire consultants because you just can't do your job and you bring people in. To me, that's not the way to do it, but this is a discrete, one-time project. It's a unique project. I think it makes sense to bring in a consultant. As Commissioner McComb just said, and Commissioner Bernheim's right, we're going to be looking at these no matter what, whether it's staff who first looks at it or consultant. We're not going to be the first look. We always react to what's given to us. So we're not going to go through dozens and dozens of pages of applications. We're going to react to what comes to us. So the question is it staff or is it a consultant? Manager McNeely said, hey, we need help from a consultant. To me, it makes sense to have a consultant do this type of discrete project. while all of us look at this cost and say $175 an hour, that's a lot, $28,000, it's a lot. I hope we spend the full $28,000 because it means we've gotten applications for $1 million of grants, right? If that comes in, paying 2.8% as an administrative cost of this program makes complete sense to me. So I understand every issue that Commissioner Bernheim brought up, and they are spot on. But I think in this case, it makes sense to do this program, so I will support it. And that's my thoughts on it. Anyone else? Commissioner Grimes?
Yeah, so I just want to be clear on this because I'm going to support what Commissioner Bernheim said. And just very quickly, I do understand the need for a consultant. I support hiring a consultant, but as I said last week, I think there was and still is opportunity to compare other consultants, although the board may not choose to do that. I think the opportunity is there. I also believe that we are not just hiring Triad to add up numbers. I specifically asked our township manager this question last week, and they are going to be involved in some putting together some of the policy with this. And I'm not totally comfortable with that without seeing what other alternatives could be offered. So that will be the reason for my vote, not because I'm against the consultant per se.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Grimes. Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Bernheim and others who support this issue. Part of the problem is that, you know, we would have the time to find out whether there are 2 or 3 other consultants who would be interested in the work. I know that there would be. I know that it may be a bit late, but this doesn't close until October. Nobody's going to start writing tomorrow, and I feel like we're really missing an opportunity to get the right type of review at a rate that's affordable, that we can still get the job done. I think that's really important. I think the other element that I'm thinking about now, it's a little slightly off base, but it has come up though now a couple of times where I've heard that there is a sort of marked list of nonprofits who will definitely get the application. Maybe there are 20 of them, maybe there are 10 of them, I'm not sure. But I have circulated to staff, actually through the stormwater fee, because that would have impacted 501c3s for their rate, had that been sought after. So I would like to see every organization who is a nonprofit, and we now know who they are, receive an invitation to apply for this the grant money. The grants committee has spent a lot of time in our meetings discussing why such a small group of 501c3s are considered. That's very unfair. And we have, for long now, for as long as I've been chair of the grants committee, have discussed this issue. So it's not exactly related to what Commissioner Bernheim is saying, but it does get you some of the important operational details that we really ought to get right in full transparency. So I'd really advocate using the stormwater list as we reach out to the community to receive grant applications.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. So the motion on the floor is whether to approve this contract. Madam Secretary, just because it's going to be close and I think it'll make everyone's life easier, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on this.
Mr. Bernheim.
Nay.
Mr. Churchill.
No.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
No.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill.
No.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zella.
Aye.
The ayes have it
9-4.
9-4.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. And the next item is on page 51. Our very patient superintendent of police has been here all night. This is an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion regarding a South Roberts Road right turn only at County Line Road. I will make the motion unless Commissioner Zelloff would like to.
I was going to second.
Oh, all right. So I will make a motion to adopt an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 145 thereof, entitled Vehicles and Traffic, Article 15, Schedule, Section 145-106, Schedule 6, intersections restricted as to turns and through traffic by establishing a right turn only restriction on South Roberts Road at County Line Road. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held July 19, 2023, and duly advertised in the July 21, 2023 edition of the Times Herald. Do you still second it, Commissioner Zelov?
I still second it.
Excellent. Is there any comment or questions on this motion? Seeing none, we will, I guess it's a roll call vote, isn't it?
For the adoption of ordinance 4278, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill.
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zeller.
Aye.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business to come before the board? Seeing none, any new business to come before the board? Commissioner Zelov.
New business would be, since we won't, we do convene on September 6th. Well, I'll promote it anyway. Bryn Mawr Day is September 9th. So it is from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the middle of Bryn Mawr. This will be the 10th annual Bryn Mawr Day. All members of the board are welcome and invited, as are all members of our community. It is a family fun day with fire truck rides and musical presentations and the circus and the petting zoo, and it's free with free parking. So 9 to 2 on Saturday, September 9th.
Thank you, Commissioner Zelov. Any other new business? Yes, Commissioner McComb.
On September 10th, from 1 to 4, the newly formed Bala Avenue of the Arts Organization will be doing an arts walk on Bala Avenue. And it will feature art by local artists, photographs. We may have a musical performance of sorts. We'll have food trucks. It's a great opportunity. It's a brand-new group, and it's an effort to kind of jumpstart Bala Avenue and get interest in the arts and cultural things happening there. So you're all cordially invited, and I guarantee it'll be a fun afternoon, and it's pre-Eagles. So you go, get some arts, and then go root for the Eagles later that day. So thank you very much.
Any other new business? With that, school is out for summer, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.